Willie D Live.
It's Willie D, y'all. Back with another episode of information and instructions to help you navigate through this wild, crazy, beautiful world. In the studio, Director of Victim Services for Crime Stoppers of Houston, Andy Kahn. What's up, Andy?
Hey, man, it's really great to be here. I am so thrilled we can sit down and talk and have a great conversation about what's going on and what I've seen and been doing for, God, I'll age myself for 30 some odd years right now. But the good thing is we both have the same hairstyles.
Right. Well, you got a little bit more than I got, though.
I've looked this way for 30 years. So.
Man, it is good to finally be able to sit down with you and talk to you directly, because I've seen you from afar for a long time fighting for victims' rights. And what I wanted to know is, like, you've been doing this, like you said, for a long time, north of 30 years.
Yep.
Okay. So what I want to know is, how did you get involved with fighting for victims' rights? You know, how did you become
How did this begin?
How did you even become so passionate about it? Was there somebody in your family that a crime was committed against, or something like that?
No, I'll tell you the story, and it's a good story. I was actually a former parole and probation officer.
Right.
I graduated with a degree in criminal justice, and then I
From U of H?
U of A, actually, yeah, University of Houston. I did.
Yeah.
And I'm originally from New York, and I went to school in Boston, and in another strange, quirky set of circumstances, I ended up in Houston, Texas, and finished up my degree here. After I graduated, I was hired by the Texas Department of Criminal Justice as a parole officer. So I worked in a variety of positions for a little over 6 years, and then I was an adult probation officer. And I want to say around 1989, things really started to get really quirky here. We had a situation, we had prison overcrowding in the state of Texas. And at that time, offenders, and I'm talking some really bad, violent offenders, you were only serving 1 month for every year you were sentenced. So, for example, if you got 20 years, you were out in 2 years.
Yeah.
You got 10, you were out, and you didn't even go. You were parole. And it was wreaking havoc on the city. And at that time, I was doing what's called parole revocation hearings. In other words, if you were on parole and you had violated your parole, you were kind of brought in front of somebody like me in a semi-judicial proceeding, and we would make decisions whether or not you had violated your parole and if you should go back to prison or not. Most of my decisions were being rescinded. I was of the opinion if you were on parole and you committed a new crime, you should probably go back. That was just my...
Right, so you was revoke.
Pretty much, if you had committed a new crime, you're going... I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's kind of a cardinal sin. And because of the overcrowding, they were overturning most of my decisions, and it was frustrating. And I watched a news segment one night, and a reporter was on, and he was saying, you know, and he's on parole, and his parole is going to be revoked. And I just started laughing. And I said, you have no idea what's going on. And I actually picked up the phone. And I called this reporter. I said, do you really? At that time, I was so frustrated. And the reason I was frustrated because I was doing a hearing on someone who had 5 prior convictions of burglaries, breaking into homes. He was in prison, came out on parole on burglary, immediately violated his parole. He did a theft. Nothing happened to him. Then he took off, became a fugitive, and again, nothing happened to him. We kept putting him back out there. Only this time, in the commission of yet another burglary, this time he killed an 89-year-old woman. And I saw that in front of me, and I literally just said, this can't happen anymore. I can't. And I guess, for lack of better words, I went public. And I went public with what's going on, and I started exposing the quota system that they actually had at that time. They were dumb enough to put it in writing, and I had it. And it ended up on a little-known show called 48 Hours. And as I like to say, I exposed the early release. They, in turn, gave me my early release.
Right.
So I'm a successful... Right. So at that time, in the mayor's race, crime was the only issue. Kind of 30 years later, kind of what's happening right now. At that time, you had 3 candidates. You had the incumbent mayor, Kathy Whitmire. You had Sylvester Turner. And you had Bob Lanier. And Lanier met with some victims groups. I had been doing volunteer work with parents of murdered children, MAD, and was known as a straight shooter, which back then was unheard of. Lanier asked these organizations if he was elected, what could he do to help them? And they said, we'd like a staff person out of the mayor's office to address victims' rights, public safety. And Bob Lanier, being a man of many, many, many words, just went, sure. He was elected. You can't make this stuff up. I was recommended for this position. I met with the mayor's chief of staff, kind of like where we are right now. He looked at me and said, I haven't the faintest bleepingest idea what you're supposed to do. Because no other city in the country had what you would call an advocate, an ombudsman, a troubleshooter, and a few other choice words that I was given, staffed out of a mayor's office. So I was very fortunate, nobody could say call New York, LA, or Chicago, see how they're doing it. I was given a carte blanche opportunity to build something from scratch, which is unheard of, particularly in government. And under the Lanier administration, I was given a very long leash to address these issues, and that's how this began. On a total, yeah.
So how do you operate within the belly of the beast and be authentic and true to yourself and fight for the victims from the inside of the system? I'm sure that there was some resistance there.
Oh, God.
From the people.
How I survived is truly, trust me, when I write the book, it's going to be great. How I managed to survive under different mayors is miraculous. And I'm a believer in the Greek gods must be looking out for me because, here's how I operate. And here's something probably very few people know. I refereed high school basketball for 28 years. I just sat down a few years ago.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Now, I would have paid to come see you referee a high school basketball game. I never knew that.
No, I refereed for 28 years, and I love basketball, and that's what kept me in the game, and I loved it. And I use the same analogy refereeing a ball game as I do with this job. When you make a call, half the crowd's going to agree with you, right? The other half's going to disagree no matter what you call. So you know what? You got to make the call you think is right. You sell it and you move on. You're not going to please everybody. And as an advocate for victims of a crime, when you advocate on behalf of one faction, you will generally infuriate the other faction. Right. And that just comes with the territory. I wouldn't be worth a damn if everybody liked everything I did. Yeah. So that's kind of what, how I've always had my mantra. And I've been kind of fortunate. I mean, there was some time, obviously I have a hate mail file yay thick. I've been accused of everything from, I think the only thing I haven't been targeted as being a serial killer or something of that nature. But when you're trying to enact change is hard. And my mantra has always been that crime victims are the only unwilling participants.